Tianbao Fu Yao Lu. Chapter 153. All previous efforts, wasted. At the mouths of the seven spouts of the earth vein, a huge boom sounded from the array in the northwestern part of Luoyang, and it collapsed. Hung Jun, the Carpiao shrieked, dashing forward. The Tongtian Fu gradually collapsed, its stones falling everywhere as it fell apart. In that instant, the pillar of light vanished. Lu Su, standing at the top of the songed stele, suddenly turned his head as he saw the Tongtian Fu collapsing. In front of the Dingding gates, Atai instantly turned his head as well. On the Tianjin bridge, Tu Reinduct was currently controlling the array, and her voice quivered as she asked, "What's happening?" Hung Jun. Ashinakayang immediately shouted. On the sacrificial platform in the Mingtang, the bright light flowed backwards, setting Li Jinglong's body alight. With his left hand, Li Jinglong controlled Lushan, and with his right, he held his sword, but he was unable to stab down. All he felt was that his consciousness was slowly, inch by inch, being drawn out of his body. He had already lost the right of control he had during the time the divinity had dwelt in him, and that God was beginning to leave his body, looking down from high above at Li Jinglong. Li Jinglong's soul was currently being appraised by Dipankara. Right after that, his left hand formed the sigil of the lamp, while his right hand reached out, sinking into Li Jinglong's chest. In the moment that the divinity's hand was about to sink into his body, the peacock tattoo on Li Jinglong's chest suddenly flashed with light, blocking his way. Li Jinglong was in incredible pain as he was caught in this stalemate. "Why?" Li Jinglong asked, his voice quivering. Why?" In the distance, that unchecked power swiftly dispersed outwards, and building after building that contained the earth vein arrays collapsed as it traveled, lightning fast, to the sky above the Mingtang. The blue light suddenly shrank in on itself, and with a huge boom, it was pulled back beneath the earth. The manifested power of Dipankara vanished, and Li Jinglong felt all of his power disappear. After that, his sight darkened, and he plummeted down from his spot about 10 jong in the air. With a long cry, the Huashi spread its wings and flew upwards. Lushan was buried in the cobbles. The blue glow of the power from the earth veins dimmed, before it gathered in on itself and vanished entirely. In the distance, the arrays in the 7 stars of the northern dipper vanished, and the structures they were contained within collapsed, the exorcists within fleeing. When the Tongtian Fu collapsed, it did so with an earth-shaking thud. So much dust went flying that it formed a thick cloud, and the impact knocked over all of the buildings in the vicinity. Hung Jun, the Carpiao shouted in shock and fright. Hung Jun was buried in the rubble, unconscious. Xiang Yu dashed towards them, hurriedly shifting beams and bricks aside. "Your Highness!" Xiang Yu shouted. Lu Su dashed to them and shouted, "What exactly happened?" The Carpiao began to haltingly describe the series of events as Lu Su carried Hung Jun out of the rubble. Xiang Yu, however, turned instantly, shielding the two of them behind her. After the Tongtian Fu collapsed and the dust settled, hundreds of Yao had appeared around them. Each of them eyed them hungrily, studying the group that stood in the rubble. Liang Danhuo led the way, a fog of blood seeping into existence around her. "Go," Xiang Yu said quietly. "Lu Su. Take the little highness with you," Xiang Yu whispered. "Don't tell him." After she said that, Xiang Yu slowly walked towards Liang Danhuo. She was wearing a white robe, and the skirt spread out over the snowy ground, as if it was the same color as this pure, untainted snow. The flock of Huashi let out long cries, each of them scrambling to be first as they sped across the sky, accompanied by the enraged bellow of Lushan that promised destruction. They headed north, flying over the city of Luoyang. The strong winds blew in the last bitterly cold front of winter, and as swiftly as a clap of thunder, it swept south. Everywhere it passed, every body of water, from creeks to seas, instantly turned to ice. In the 14th year of the Tianbao era, on the 2nd day of the last month, Luoyang fell entirely into enemy hands. The exorcism department of the Great Tang fell just short of success in their missions, and they fled Luoyang in a panic. The icy cold northern wind felt like countless knives sent by the god that had created this world as it swept down south. It came down from the sky itself, sweeping across every city and every village on this divine land. Black smoke rose into the air, and the flames of war greedily consumed life, destroying hope. 200,000 Tang soldiers were utterly routed along the Hebei Road and the Henan Road, the Fanyang rebels scattering them like wolves in a pack of sheep. Across the central plains, 9 of 10 houses were left abandoned, and the bodies of the starved filled the wildernesses, ravenous dogs gathering in packs to feast. The lands to both the north and south of the Yellow River had become charred and blackened. The 14th year of the Tianbao era, the 6th day of the last month. Hung Jun's hand twitched slightly as he jolted out of his deep sleep, letting out a gasp with difficulty. He was so cold that his entire body was quivering, and he felt as if he had been trapped in a cavern of ice. His head was splitting with pain, and when he looked down, he found that he was stripped completely naked. Bruises littered his body, and even a slight movement caused him to feel pain. His body burned with heat, as if he was running a fever, and his clothes were folded on a table by the side of the bed. "Is anyone there?" Hung Jun groaned. He saw that there was water on the table, so he reached out and drank it. That water was very cold, and after drinking a whole bowl, he finally felt somewhat better. He rose and dressed himself, but when he climbed out of bed, he staggered. Just as Hung Jun was pushing the door open, there was the sound of movement from outside. Cold air poured in, causing his throat to close up, and he had no way of speaking. Outside, Lu Su was currently chopping wood, and upon hearing noises, he hurried in. The two of them stared dumbly at each other for a moment. "You're awake." Lu Su was actually a little nervous. "Where is this?" Hung Jun's head had begun to hurt again. The last thing he remembered was what had happened in the array. "The northwestern part of the Shan Commandery," Lu Su said, hurriedly helping Hung Jun back inside. "You're running a fever, so rest a while more. The big wolf has gone up into the mountains to search for medicine for you." Hung Jun nodded, before looking at Lu Su again. "You know what I want to ask," Hung Jun said. "Li Jinglong is all right," Lu Su said, letting Hung Jun lie back down before he glanced at him. "He's a bit injured, and he's currently healing up. He fell asleep just now, don't wake him just yet." Hung Jun knew that Lu Su would never lie to him, so he nodded and lay down again, murmuring, "I feel so terrible." Lu Su's forehead was furrowed deeply as he tested Hung Jun's forehead. "Did it succeed?" Hung Jun asked. "It failed," Lu Su said quietly. "But thankfully, everyone is still alive." When Hung Jun heard these words, he finally loosed a breath in relief, and he fell into an exhausted sleep. This sleep seemed to last even longer than his unconsciousness from before. Hung Jun vaguely heard the sounds of Mo Rijin and Lu Su in discussion, and Lu Su said, "He woke once. Mo Rijin, he'll be fine once he takes this medicine. Wake him to drink some medicine and eat something." Hung Jun opened his eyes blearily. Mo Rijin was helping him up, and Lu Su was holding a bowl, feeding him the medicine. The two of them worked well together. Not long after, Hung Jun finished the medicine, and the Carpiao's voice asked, "Is Hung Jun awake?" "Shh," Lu Su said. "Let him sleep for a while longer. I'll leave the food here." The Carpiao said, "About the other one?" "A little quieter," Mo Rijin whispered back. Hung Jun lay back down limply, and Mo Rijin rose and left. After drinking the medicine, Hung Jun sweated it out, and his fever slowly receded. He just felt a little weak now. Lu Su had set a bedroll out on the ground next to him, and was sleeping in it when Hung Jun woke again, a little more clear-headed than before. He rose on light feet to eat something. On the table was a bowl of egg porridge that the Carpiao had made. Li Jinglong is next door, Lu Su said, turning over. If you're better, then go keep him company ba. Hung Jun ed, before cleaning up the bowl and chopsticks and walking out of the bedroom. He found that they were currently residing in someone's home. In the night, the northern wind whistled past, and the world was pitch black. He could not see the stars, nor the moon. All he could see was that there were 2 rooms, and numerous bloodstains still splattered the foot of the walls. He paused for a short moment by the bloodstains, before he went to the other room and knocked on the door gently. Morrigan, his upper half bared, came out to open the door. Better now? Morrigan asked quietly, but he didn't let Hung Jun in. Hung Jun looked in, and Morrigan seemed to want to say something more, but someone asked from inside, "Is that Hung Jun?" Jinglong. Hung Jun hurriedly dashed past Morrigan, charging in like a gust of wind. Morrigan turned and walked out, closing the door behind him. Hung Jun lit a light, and the oil lamp lit the room in a swathe of dim light. This room was much colder than the room he and Lu Su were in, as if the firewood had been taken to that room, and as it was snowing, the room was both damp and cold. Li Jinglong was lying on the bed, and he turned his head to watch Hung Jun fixedly. Hung Jun leapt to the bed, stroking Li Jinglong's forehead. Li Jinglong smiled tiredly at him. "Sorry, I failed again," Li Jinglong said. Hung Jun did not speak. He reached a hand into the blankets, grasping Li Jinglong's. Li Jinglong's hand, however, only shifted slightly, as if even lifting his fingers had used up all the strength he had left in him. Hung Jun felt up along his palm to the pulse point above his wrist, and he pressed down slightly. With great difficulty, Li Jinglong turned his head, watching Hung Jun. His breaths were very weak. They said nothing, simply staying silent like this, but Hung Jun already knew of the cruel reality of things. Li Jinglong's body was done for. His meridians had almost all been destroyed by the power of the earth veins, and his martial arts were gone. From now on, he could only lie on the bed. He had become a cripple who could not even survive on his own. "Can you sit up?" Hung Jun asked quietly. "Let me take a look." He lifted Li Jinglong's blankets aside, only to see that his upper body was bare, and his shoulder had been splinted. "I've already taken medicine," Li Jinglong said. Lu Su dug it out from inside your medicine bag. "The effects won't be as good if you eat it too much," Hung Jun said. "This is the second time you've eaten the fire transformation pill." Li Jinglong smiled bitterly. "He fed them all to me." Li Jinglong's shoulder blade, collarbone, left femur, and right calf bones had suffered several breaks. When the Huashi had rescued him, he had also been suffering from severe internal bleeding, and Lu Su and Morrigan wrung their brains dry before they managed to save him. Hung Jun felt over those places on Li Jinglong's body. Morrigan's method of setting the bones had been too harsh, because he was not well versed in medicine. There were several spots where the bones had not been set well. But the bones were already knitting together, and if he wanted to reset them, he would have to break them again. No matter what, Hung Jun was not willing to let Li Jinglong suffer through that pain again, and he said, "You will get better." He had all kinds of medicine in his bag, except for anesthetics. When An Lushan had taken the city, for the sake of saving the soldiers, Hung Jun had used up all his anesthesia. When he thought about how Morrigan must have forcefully set Li Jinglong's bones for him, Hung Jun felt a writhing mass of pain in his heart. "I can't sense the power of the heart lamp anymore," Li Jinglong said calmly. "I'm afraid that in the future, I will no longer be able to protect you." Hung Jun said, "Is it gone?" "It's gone," Li Jinglong replied. "It's odd though, I don't know where it went." Hung Jun had to resist the powerful urge to bury his face in the sheets by Li Jinglong and have a good cry. He mustered up a smile, doing his best to lift the corners of his mouth. Li Jinglong watched Hung Jun quietly, without making a sound. There was a trace of an emotion that Hung Jun had never seen in his eyes, despair. "It's still there," Hung Jun said. It's just that right now, your meridians are destroyed, so you can't sense it. Why don't you try it? A bit of hope blazed to life again in Li Jinglong's heart. Hung Jun shook his head. If he were to pour the power of the pentacolor sacred light into Li Jinglong's body at this time, that would cause him a great amount of pain. Li Jinglong murmured quietly, "It was my fault. I'm sorry, Hung Jun, I even lost the heart lamp that you brought." When Hung Jun heard these words, he could hold his tears back no longer. He hugged Li Jinglong, his tears coursing down his face, and yet he gritted his teeth, holding it in as he said, his voice shaking, "As long as you're all right, it's okay. What's the point of speaking of such things?" The heavy snow outside fell in flakes as large as goose feathers. Lu Su and Morajin lay on the bed together, wrapped in blankets. Morajin said, "Your guy's room is really warm." Lu Su turned over, turning his face to the wall, asking quietly, "What will they do?" Morajin did not say anything. Lu Su asked, "What will happen to the exorcism department in the future?" Morajin comforted him. "Things will get better." Lu Su continued. The seal that the heart lamp set down vanished, and the nightmares in Hung Jun's body are currently nourishing his devil seed. In these past few days, I have become less and less able to control him. Morajin turned and hugged Lu Su from behind. "Lu Su." Morajin. "Lu Su, at such a time like this. You're still in the mood too. This is out of my control." Morajin said. "I don't have a choice either, I've held it in for too long." Morajin's thing pressed up against Lu Su, and Lu Su was torn between laughing and crying. Morajin asked, "What will happen?" "He'll be corrupted," Lu Su said. "From now on, the devil seed in Hung Jun's body will begin to grow, and he will go back to how he was before Dunhuang. The resentment in the world will all gather in his body, and with every day that passes, the devil seed will grow even stronger and more powerful." Morajin made a shushing noise, telling Lu Su not to continue. "When I was small, Shakina told me a story," Morajin said. "In the dark of the night, there was a person who was being chased by a wolf pack." Lu Su fell silent. Morajin said into his ear, "Do you know what method is used to fend off wolves, out in the desert?" "Fire," Lu Su replied. Morajin said, "Across the thousands of li of flat land in that vast wilderness, there was only a single, wizened tree. So, he lit a fire and set that tree alight. The fire light shone across the wilderness surrounding him, and the wolf pack retreated. But the wind had worn away at this tree for thousands of years, and it could only hold out for a little while. Very quickly, the fire grew smaller and smaller, leaving behind the tiniest wisp of a flame." Lu Su asked, "Could he hold out until daybreak?" Morajin's deep, quiet voice said into Lu Su's ear, "The night sky was blanketed in clouds, and he could not see the light of the moon. He did not know when the dawn would break, and as the wisp of flame grew smaller, he saw, in the darkness, even more wolves, enough to fill the wilderness around him." Lu Su took up the narrative. "So, he stood guard in front of the wisp of flame that was almost extinguished, waiting bitterly for the arrival of the dawn. If the wisp of flame went out, the wolf pack would tear him to pieces." Morajin ed. "He began to search for anything that he could burn, but with everything that he burned, he had one less. He did not know if he could hold out past this night." "And in the end?" Lu Su asked. "There is no ending to this story," Morajin said. "It depends on what you believe. Perhaps the dawn will come, or perhaps the fire will die out first. But say, when that person was warming himself by the fire, what do you suppose he was thinking about?" Lu Su replied, "His family." Morajin did not reply. Lu Su guessed again. "That he wanted to keep living." Still, Morajin did not reply, and Lu Su guessed for a third time, that he wanted to go home. Morajin replied, "He was thinking about how warm this fire was." And saying this, he tightened his arms a little, hugging Lu Su tightly. Sleep ba. They will be able to make it through this. Whether this fire burns out first, or the dawn comes first, that all depends on fate. When you're warming yourself by the fire, focus on that. Don't think too much about the rest. Lu Su shut his eyes, and he said no more. End chapter. Tianbao Fu Yao Lu. Chapter 154. Open and honest confrontation. Where's Atai? Hung Jun lay by Li Jinglong's side. Li Jinglong's body was no longer the warm furnace that it had been before. His weak constitution made his hands and feet icy cold, and the temperature in the blankets was like that of an icy cavern. When we were fleeing Luoyang, we were split up, Li Jinglong said. I imagine he's currently looking for us. Hung Jun did not ask any further. Li Jinglong had spent the entire night with his eyes open, staring off into space, and Hung Jun did not dare to ask what they would do after this. What could they do? Things were already like this, and An Lushan's armies had already fought their way to who knows where. In the city, what had Li Jinglong's reason been for falling one step short of success? Why had Akalanatha appeared when he was activating the power of the earth veins? Hung Jun didn't dare to ask a single one of those questions. He looked up at Li Jinglong. He couldn't even do like he used to, pillowing his head on Li Jinglong's arm, because his shoulder was still wrapped in a splint. Are you a little warmer? Hung Jun asked. This is much better, Li Jinglong replied. Hung Jun hugged Li Jinglong's waist gently, placing the phoenix plume on his chest while he used his own body temperature to warm him. Once you're a little better, I'll take you back to Yejin Palace, Hung Jun said. Chongming and Qingxiang will definitely have a way. I don't have the face to go up there again, Li Jinglong replied quietly. Hung Jun said in response, I also don't have the face to go home. When he had left last time, Hung Jun knew that he had thoroughly wounded Chongming's heart. This time, if he was to bring Li Jinglong back to beg Chongming for some way to cure him, that would probably cause him even more indignation. Plus, he usually spent all day following Li Jinglong around, not asking after his adopted father at all. Now that his lover was so injured, for him to go home and beg Chongming. Hung Jun couldn't help wanting to feel disgusted at himself. But I do not regret it, Hung Jun continued. Sorry, Li Jinglong replied quietly. Let's not talk of it anymore, Hung Jun said. Jinglong, rouse your spirits and get up. This isn't like you. You're right, Li Jinglong slowly shut his eyes, letting out a tired breath. Just as Hung Jun thought he was gathering his strength, however, Li Jinglong said, in these past few days, I've been thinking about many things. Do you think that this really isn't like me? Hung Jun frowned, studying Li Jinglong strangely. Li Jinglong continued, actually, this is my true self. Li Jinglong sighed and said, I have never mentioned this to you before, that moment right after I obtained the heart lamp. Hung Jun asked curiously, what does that mean? That feeling was very hard to describe, Li Jinglong murmured, his eyes shut. It was as if my entire world had brightened with it. When was that? Hung Jun was starting to sense that something wasn't quite right. What kind of a person do you think I was before? Li Jinglong suddenly asked. Hung Jun replied, you are the best. Li Jinglong was silent. Hung Jun did truthfully feel that Li Jinglong was a very, very good person. He was compassionate, brave, smart, and decisive. He firmly believed in his ideals, and in Hung Jun's eyes, he could basically be described with the word perfect. But in my heart, I know, Li Jinglong said quietly, that I was not like this before. What? But Hung Jun suddenly thought of something that had completely changed their destinies. As expected, Li Jinglong said, that was after I obtained the heart lamp. To be accurate, it was after I met you. Hung Jun's breaths quickened. Li Jinglong continued, at what point in time did the divide happen? Perhaps it was when I opened my eyes in Pinkongli and saw you appear in front of me, that I dimly began to feel this. Then, when I received my orders and entered the exorcism department and saw you again, it felt as if a beam of light was shining into my heart," Li Jinglong said. Everything that I had once fussed over, everything that I had held in high regard, was no longer important. Hung Jun had heard a lot about what Li Jinglong had done before, yet aside from the members of the exorcism department, when anyone saw him and Li Jinglong together, there was an odd look in their eyes. It was as if they were laughing silently at them, or as if they understood something. Plus, he also knew that when Li Jinglong was young, he had offended quite a lot of people, and no matter who he was facing, whether it be the emperor, the imperial consort, the prime minister, or various officials, he always acted as if he would only listen to them if he wanted to. That was why he had ended up in such a terrible position. However, once he took charge of the exorcism department, he had had a steady stream of luck in obtaining merits and promotions, as if the Li Jinglong that Hung Jun had heard of and the Li Jinglong that he was seeing now were not the same person. "Now, that kind of feeling has returned again," Li Jinglong said. "It's a heavy weight that bears down on my heart. Could the heart lamp's power change a person so much?" Hung Jun had never heard Qing Xiang mention it before. Then, in that case, if the heart lamp had vanished, where had it gone? He frowned as he looked at Li Jinglong. "So, with the heart lamp's disappearance, you feel that it is a little hard to bear?" Hung Jun looked at Li Jinglong in confusion. "I have become immortal again," Li Jinglong whispered to Hung Jun. "What you saw, the me of the past, was nothing more than a facade that the heart lamp gifted me. That was not the real me." "Then, what is the real you like?" Hung Jun asked doubtfully. "Weak, selfish, degenerate," Li Jinglong said darkly. "I always leave things unfinished, and I covet being able to do things in order to impress others. Powerless. The only thing I can be proud of is nothing more than my birth, as well as my archery skills. Now, I do not even have my martial skills to fall back on." "So then?" Hung Jun asked. Li Jinglong tilted his head slightly with great difficulty, watching Hung Jun with reddened eyes. Hung Jun, however, scooted forward and kissed him. "Li Jinglong." Li Jinglong widened his eyes in surprise. This was the first time that Hung Jun was taking such initiative and kissing him so passionately. When Li Jinglong was kissed, he felt his brain immediately go blank, and his heart began to beat wildly. "Li Jinglong, woo." Li Jinglong had originally wanted to say, "The me of right now is not worthy of you," or perhaps "the me of right now cannot protect you," or something else equally dejected. But Hung Jun's kiss was like a torrential storm, and there was not a shred of hesitation in it as he used such an aggressive, domineering method to invade his mouth. "Li Jinglong, all right, listen to me." But before he could finish speaking, Hung Jun, who didn't dare to touch his chest and had a hand propped up against the pillow instead to press himself down lightly on top of him, let Li Jinglong take a breath, before he subjected him to another thorough round of kissing. Li Jinglong often doted on Hung Jun, but he had never thought that this guy's stubbornness was this devastating. He wanted to lift a hand and push Hung Jun aside, but he had not the strength, because even turning his head aside was difficult. Hung Jun's tongue teased him, and as if he had encountered little resistance at all, he forcefully grabbed the back of Li Jinglong's neck, solidly kissing him for almost half a k. Li Jinglong almost couldn't breathe. His head spun and his vision went spotty, and in the face of this ruthless kiss, his mood turned better again. Just as he was about to do his absolute best in pushing Hung Jun away, Hung Jun mercilessly stopped up his mouth, until Li Jinglong's consciousness went blurry. As Hung Jun kissed him, he reached down with a hand and stroked down his body. When he felt a handful of sticky warmth, he jolted. "You," Hung Jun immediately began to laugh loudly at that. Li Jinglong had truly held it in for too long. He had no way to move, but he could still feel, so when Hung Jun kissed him until his very head spun and then touched him like that, the moment that Hung Jun's hand had touched him there he had basically let it out instantly. Li Jinglong. Li Jinglong's face was bright red. There was finally some color back in his face, and he was still panting slightly for breath. Hung Jun said, "No matter how you become, your skills in that aspect are still very good, and your thing there is still very large." In the midst of his dead end, when he heard those words, Li Jinglong couldn't resist bursting out into laughter. He laughed a few more times, accidentally shifting the areas where he had broken his bones, and he grunted. It hurt so much. Hung Jun leapt off the bed and boiled some hot water, before lifting the blankets aside and wiping Li Jinglong's body down. His body was as it had been before, and that peacock tattoo was still there on his sculpted chest. Hung Jun ducked his head and pressed a kiss to that tattoo, before he then kissed Li Jinglong's lips. "Do you want to do it?" Li Jinglong asked. "We'll do it once you get better." Though that was what Hung Jun said, his gaze kept sweeping back and forth across Li Jinglong's naked, manly body, which roused a wave of embarrassment in Li Jinglong. A moment later, Hung Jun found that he couldn't bear it after all, so he took off his own clothes and laid down by Li Jinglong's side, using his hand to finish himself. "Hung Jun," Li Jinglong said quietly. Hung Jun wiped the two of them clean, before pulling the blankets over them, lying there like an obedient child. "From now on, let me be the one to protect you," Hung Jun said earnestly. "Don't let your thoughts wander too much." Saying this, he yawned, and he spread open Li Jinglong's broad hand with his own, entwining their fingers, as he fell asleep. In the kitchen, Zhao Yun said quietly, "Hey, Zhao Zilong, the little hyena seems to have woken up." The carpiao was lying on the hearth, which still had some residual heat in it. It flipped over and said, "Tomorrow, I'll put in a word for you." Zhao Yun asked, "Say, do you think he'll take us in?" "He will," the carpiao replied. "He even forgave me, so how could he not take you in?" Zhao Yun was still a little worried, so the carpiao added, "You've done a great favor in rescuing Li Jinglong. He'll give you whatever you want, never mind letting you be his subordinate." Zhao Yun then sought assurance once again on Hung Jun's personality and temperament, as well as the words that he liked to hear. The carpiao comforted him once more, that our family isn't as bothersome as in Lushan, and it was only with that Zhao Yun, his fears assuaged, lay down in front of the hearth and went to sleep. On the 7th day of the last month, Shan Prefecture was so cruelly cold that a drop of water could freeze in the air, and the northern wind gusted and howled outside. The next morning, everyone moved to Li Jinglong's room, gathering around the phoenix plume as they warmed themselves by the fire. Lu Su, who was towards the periphery, still shivered a little, so the grey wolf reached a claw out and dragged him in, so that he was in front of him. "Must you shift into this form?" Lu Su asked, his expression wooden. "It's to fend off the cold," the grey wolf's deep voice replied, pressing its chest covered in soft fur up against Lu Su. "This place is so cold," Hung Jun said. "The main thing is that in 100 li radius, there is no one else here," Li Jinglong explained weakly. "Chang'an is prosperous, and when there are more people, the weather no longer feels cold. This village is situated on the open plains, so there isn't even anything to block the winds." With great effort, Hung Jun lifted Li Jinglong, propping him up with both the blankets and the pillow so that he could sit up. The carpiao came in and set the food down on the table. "There's even fish!" Hung Jun exclaimed. "Didn't you tell us we couldn't eat carp?" Lu Su asked the carpiao. "There isn't a choice," the carpiao said. "There's extenuating circumstances. Outside, there are even people eating people now. Everyone." The carpiao said to Hung Jun, "There's a Yaogwai that rescued second eldest who wants to come in and make your acquaintance. Is that okay?" When it put it like that, Hung Jun remembered that last night, he had heard Lu Su say that at that critical moment, it had been that Hua Shi Yao who had rescued Li Jinglong. He hurriedly said, "Where is the person who we owe our thanks to?" "The Yao who you owe your thanks to," the carp Yao corrected him. "He's currently waiting outside." Hung Jun hurriedly welcomed him in. Zhao Yun was currently shivering in the cold breeze outside, and upon hearing that invitation, came in and immediately began to kowtow to Hung Jun. Hung Jun hurriedly said, "I should be the one thanking you." Hung Jun knelt and kowtowed to Zhao Yun as well, and with that, Zhao Yun felt his soul fly away out of fright. He yelped, "You mustn't. Little Highness. You'll whittle away my cultivation." All right, the carp Yao said. "Why does this look like you two are going through the 3 marriage bows?" It was only then that the two of them rose. Hung Jun then thanked Zhao Yun profusely, while Zhao Yun hurried to decline humbly, saying, "It was just my duty, just my duty. Of course I would come to the prince consort's aid when he was in trouble." Hung Jun had been feeding Li Jinglong some congee, and upon hearing those words, Li Jinglong immediately spat his mouthful out. Zhao Yun had originally been a huashi in the Maluo River, and he had, at first, wanted to cultivate into a dragon. But as it turned out, he had eaten something wrong, and had cultivated a pair of wings instead, so he was a member of the aquatic tribe that didn't look aquatic, and though he looked like a member of the avian tribe, he wasn't. There were several tens of small snakes in the Xiang River who, after receiving help from his Yao power, had cultivated into members of the avian tribe, but historically, one had to be part of the aquatic tribe to cultivate into a dragon. The correct sequence of events was to first cultivate into a Qiao, then undergo a heavenly tribulation. With these 2 wings poking out, Zhao Yun truly didn't know what he was supposed to do. He couldn't get rid of them, nor could he cut them off by himself. "Let me take a look." Hung Jun inspected Zhao Yun's wings with curiosity, before he flipped open the Yao subduing records to look him up. There was, in fact, a record of the Huashi clan that Zhao Yun belonged to. "What exactly did you eat, for you to have grown wings?" Li Jinglong asked. Zhao Yun scratched his head, his expression one of "if you ask me, who am I supposed to ask?" It had been many years since then, and he had long since forgotten. "No way." Hung Jun was shocked. "You ate Chu Yuan." The book stated that after Chu Yuan threw himself into the Maluo River, he was consumed by snakes, and the snakes that had eaten Chu Yuan became Huashi. Zhao Yun hurried to clear his own name. "I didn't. That's a far-fetched story. I wasn't even born then. This year, I'm only turning 400-something. Hung Jun agreed. "When the time comes, I'll take you to see Chongming." Zhao Yun replied, "I'm afraid that since they're all birds, we'll..." "It's all right," Hung Jun said. "If he doesn't want you, then you guys can come with me. Where are the rest of your comrades?" As if a great burden had been lifted from him, a bit of hope finally appeared in Zhao Yun's expression, and he said, "There are some 60-odd comrades of mine. They have all scattered to lead our pursuers away. I told everyone that once their task was done, to gather by the Jing River to wait." Hung Jun nodded and took in Zhao Yun. Zhao Yun then carefully took a seat to the side, doing what he could to be on his best behavior. Li Jinglong watched Hung Jun for a while, a smile in his eyes, before the carp Yao began to distribute food amongst them. It was all made from ingredients that Zhao Yun had found and brought back: congee, broiled carp, as well as a few plates of stir-fried wild greens. As Li Jinglong ate the congee, he found that some of his strength had returned, and he said to Hung Jun, "Let me do it myself." "Can you move?" Mo Rijin asked. "I can manage." Li Jinglong's hand trembled incessantly as he gripped the spoon. That spoon seemed to weigh 1,000 jin, and as he finally lifted it to his mouth with great effort, much of the congee had already spilled out of the spoon. Hung Jun moved to go feed him, only for Lu Su to say, "Let him move around a bit, and he'll slowly get better." Hung Jun watched Li Jinglong worriedly, and for a moment, everyone watched him eat. "You all should eat your own food," Li Jinglong said. Under the influence of the fire transformation pill, the meridians throughout Li Jinglong's body were repairing themselves, but even if they were completely reformed, there was no way for him to return his body to how it had been before. During this meal, everyone was caught up in their own thoughts, so the room was very quiet. Hung Jun wanted to find a few words to say to spark some conversation, but Lu Su could tell he was trying to find some, so he opened his mouth and asked, "How long are we planning on staying here?" "Until Jinglong recovers a bit more, probably," Hung Jun said. "Why don't you two take a trip back to Yaojin Palace first?" Mo Rijin suggested. "It works out perfectly, since Zhao Yun can fly. Speaking of which, you can fly, right?" He addressed that last question to Zhao Yun. "I can manage to do so," Zhao Yun replied. "I'm not like a dragon, so I can't fly too far. After flying for a Shishan, I have to take a rest. After all, Huashi were not like dragons, Kun, the golden-winged great Peng, or other Yaokings. When dragons rode along in the clouds, a barrier of wind would form around them, and in one day, they could travel over 2,000 li. Huashi, however, could not do that. If they were to ride it back, they would be subject to the full force of the icy winds, and with how cold the weather was, that would be quite a struggle." "I won't go," Li Jinglong said to Hung Jun. "At least, I don't want to go up with this kind of method." The group fell silent again. None of them pressured him for the time being, so Hung Jun had no choice but to nod in agreement. "All right, then let's speak of it later." Lu Su seemed to have something he wanted to say, but a glance from Mo Rijin stopped him. The Carpio put away the bowls and plates, and there was actually tea to drink. As the icy winds battered away furiously at the house, the group split up and sat along the sides of the long table, each of them holding a cup of hot tea in their hands. For a time, their despair and worry for the future lightened by quite a bit. Lu Su studied the jade green tea in his cup, and he thought of that story Mo Rijin had told him, of the man warming himself by the fire on that winter's night. End chapter.